morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. And well, today's the start of Saskatchewan's election campaign. A couple of days ago, British Columbia launched an election and well, now Saskatchewan's joining suit. Ryan Kessler says Saskatchewan Party leader Scott Moe confirms the writ will drop tomorrow, launching the official start of the provincial election campaign. Man, that happened quick, didn't it? They were just kind of bandying it around through the last week and then all of a sudden, we're going to election. Can happen fast, right? Can happen fast if the NDP aren't propping up Justin Trudeau. We'll talk about that later. Catherine McKenna says, a historic day with Parliament's first ever hybrid vote. Thanks to everyone who helped make it happen so we can continue to serve Canadians through the pandemic. I don't like the fact that they changed the structure of the House of Commons this way. I was talking about it before. If you start changing the rules on the fly like this, like what about traditions? What about our history? What about all of that stuff? What about the long-standing way this has been done? Like for all of the history of Canada. And like, make no mistake, we're going to look at the death numbers. I've had some people sending me information and that's wonderful. Thank you for doing that. Thanks for helping out. We're going to talk about this soon. We're going to look at the death numbers, right? And look at like the numbers of COVID deaths, right? Ontario, but this matters, right? This matters. It matters. But first, we're going to get into, deficits. And the PBO, Parliamentary Budget Office, is projecting a federal deficit of $328.5 billion in 2020-2021 fiscal year. So that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Like we were having surpluses. Do you remember what surpluses were in the Harper years? Even through the financial crisis, we had surpluses. So the fact that we've spent and before COVID, our debt was about $20 billion, maybe $30 billion. And if we were getting into the $40 billion, people would get upset. And we have blown that out of the water, and we've gone up by magnitudes, orders of magnitude, right? Like you have to do multiplication to get here from 40, right? To get to 328 from 40. So that's quite a lot of numbers. That's expensive. And that's billions, right? And that's not the debt, that's the deficit. That's how much we're overspending. So here's Aaron Woodrick, and he says, well, he's responding to this tweet. Lisa Corbella, I think that's how you say it, Miss Corbella, says, this is a must-watch speech by Pierre Poilievre. Our deficit this year cost every man, woman, and child in Canada $10,000. Wow, that's a lot. Yes, that's a lot of money. It's expensive. Billions with a B. And Woodrick says, also, the federal debt is now rising by about $10,800 per second, which is nearly $1 billion per day. Right? And I was talking about the debt clock in Times Square in the States, and I went to the States years ago, down to New York just for fun, right? I don't think I'd go now, just like I wouldn't go to Toronto, but I did back then. And you could watch the debt clock on the side of the building running up like a comical clock, like a cartoon clock that means nothing, right? Because it's saying numbers that are so big you can't comprehend them, right? You can't, like, you're looking at that and you're like, ha, that's how much money this country owes to who, right? And the U.S. has some cushion because they're the country that everything is purchased with, right? It's the main currency of the world. But Canada doesn't have that luxury, right? So eventually, the GDP, the debt to GDP ratio is going to get so out of hand. It's already out of hand, but it's going to be completely unchained from reality. And people who measure this stuff are starting to pipe up. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, the Globe and Mail is reporting. Government moves to shut down debate on new income supports. First, we've got to talk about spending more money. Right? More money has got to go out. We have got to get ahead of this thing. We're going to look at how bad this thing is, COVID-19, before the end of the video. But financially, it's bad. Federal Liberals move to shut down debate on billions in pandemic-related spending. We don't need to talk about it. We just need to do it. We've got to move fast. Remember what moving fast did for Remember what dragging her heels did for Jody Wilson-Raybould and her political career? Remember what not listening to the Justin Trudeau did to Mr. Morneau's political career? What political career? You have to be a yes man in Justin Trudeau's government. Okay, back to this. The Liberal government is moving to limit debate on legislation that would approve tens of billions of dollars in new pandemic-related spending and expand eligibility for a national sick leave benefit. Employment Minister Carla Quattro introduced a revised bill on Monday afternoon that reflects a deal the minority Liberal government negotiated to secure the support of the NDP. Also on Monday, the Liberals proposed a motion that, if approved, would allow the government to pass the bill through all stages of the House of Commons in a single day. It's time for action. It's time for urgency. Government House Leader Pablo Rodriguez said in defending the plan to limit debate time on the bill. Canadians need our help now, and this is exactly what the motion is meant to accomplish. Quick action. Canadians need members of the House to recognize the urgency of the situation and work together. Remember when Greta said, like, I want you to panic? You don't make good choices when you're panicking, and you don't make good choices in a rushed debate. Maybe you could make the debate better. I think the Conservatives make this case in this article, so I'll let them do that. But through debate isn't always to just come up against somebody. It's to point out the flaws, right? Like if you have a group of 10 people who've been spending 4 years together or whatever, setting policy, maybe you've got giant blind spots that you don't see, right? And that somebody else might see and say, hey, but what about this? Oh yeah, well, I guess we could do that. Right? But instead, no, let's limit the debate and let's ram this through, and let's ram this through by demonizing the opponents, right? Like not just that we're going to do it quickly and without input, we're going to do it while also demonizing anybody who says that there might be a better way. There might be a better way. Back to this. The Liberal government used similar procedures to rush through pandemic spending bills earlier this year. I like this. The Conservative Party has also used such tactics when in power. The government has yet to deliver a 2020 budget. It's been 555 days last time I checked, and that was a few days ago, since a budget has been delivered in Canada. Is that usual? Is that normal? Is that acceptable to the Canadian public? Why aren't there more news articles about the lack of a budget? Why isn't our finance minister, who's not a finance minister, being held to account? Back to this. But projected, the government has yet to deliver a 2020 budget, but projected in a July fiscal snapshot that the deficit for the current year would be $343 billion. We just saw it's actually $328.5 according to the PBO. The Parliamentary Budget Officer will release a report Tuesday, that's today, updating its projections for the federal deficit based on spending announcements made since July. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland has said she intends to release a fiscal update this fall. A fiscal update? Where's the budget? Finance Minister, Deputy Prime Minister? Back to this. The move was strongly condemned in the House of Commons by Conservative and Bloc Québécois MPs who said time should be scheduled for MPs to review the bill and hear from expert witnesses in committee. The Conservatives had proposed to have MPs sit over the weekend to debate the proposals, but the government rejected the suggestion. Opposition MPPs said the bill could have been thoroughly studied and passed already had the Prime Minister not prorogued Parliament in August. Maybe we can make it better by having more debates and interactions in the House. Conservative MP John Brassard said instead the government is rushing this through, painting the opposition as the bad guys, and if we do not agree with it. If we do not agree with it. The government has had a chance a month ago to pass the measures, but the Prime Minister prorogued Parliament to save his political skin from the WE scandal. The NDP is expected to support the government's plan to pass C4 in one day. Monday's Bill C4, which is a revised version of Bill C2, introduced on Thursday, proposed to implement new income support programs that were announced last month. The measures are to replace the expired Canada Emergency Response Benefit, CERB, of a $500 a week with an enhanced employment insurance system and programs aimed at people who have lost their income or who can't work because of COVID-19. When the package was announced in August, the government said it would cost $37 billion. To secure the support of the NDP, the government agreed to increase minimum payments under the new programs from $400 a week to $500 a week, matching the payments level of CERB. It also agreed to broaden criteria for Canadians seeking to access a new Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit for individuals who've experienced a drop in employment income of 50% or more because they contracted COVID-19 or were required to isolate themselves for reasons related to the pandemic. The new language the NDP negotiated expands eligibility to include people who have underlying conditions, are undergoing treatments, or have contracted sicknesses that, in the opinion of a medical practitioner, nurse practitioner, person in authority, government, or public health authority, would make them more susceptible to COVID-19. Could you get your priest to sign this to say that you're more susceptible to COVID-19? Yeah, it's just got to be somebody in authority, so whatever. Just somebody in authority. Have you ever seen the John Mulaney sketch with the pony taking care of the dog? Right? Like, just get somebody to sign this. They don't have to have credentials. I don't care. I just need the signature. Okay, back to this. Dan Albus says, this is a mess. It's a big, big mess. And we've got government willing, a fourth place NDP that lost half their seats, propping up a liberal minority that lost their majority because of how badly they mismanaged everything. And this looks like it's going to carry on. Okay, here's Dan Albus. Unconscionable that Trudeau Liberals are now using the PM's prorogation that delayed the return of the House to claim there's only time for just over 4 hours of debate to approve the $50 billion of spending, up from 37, right? This is from a prime minister who accuses others of playing political games. Yeah, we'll just prorogue Parliament so that WE scandal goes away, right? A couple of months of no committees, that'll clean things right up. And then Christmas, boom, right? Thanksgiving and then Christmas after a canceled, Halloween and then Christmas after a canceled Thanksgiving. That's what I meant to say. Goodness. Isn't this just wild? Like, what a trip. What an absolute trip to be. Even if you were fully engaged with the propaganda and wore your mask dutifully and were terrified for the school children despite the evidence to the contrary, wouldn't you be questioning some of this now? Wouldn't you be saying, like, financially this can't continue? Like, we can't just replace our economy with the government printing money? Somebody somewhere must be waking up. Where are the patriots? Where are the people who are collecting together and saying, we've got to fix this, and we've got to fix this not with a YouTube show. We've got to fix this. Where are you? Where are you? And I mean, I've talked to some people. I've had conversations with people. People understand the stakes and they say, what are we going to do? I don't know, but we have to come up with something. Time is slipping away and the fight is, they're doubling down and we're not organized. We don't even have a united front. There are some people with some fronts, Hugs Over Masks, the gun registry people, the gun people, but this financial stuff is a mess. It's a disaster. It is a self-made. We've cut off our foot. We've cut off our leg, just like at the really meaty part, right in the middle, right in the middle of the top of the leg. I don't know. I'm not a human apparently. I can't remember the word. It doesn't matter. We've amputated a really big part of our economy, and we're all just kind of sitting around going, "What do you think we should do?" Well, let's just leave these guys in charge. Well, they left a few minutes ago to make a pizza. Before or after I finished cutting my leg off. They knew you were doing it. Okay, back to this. On Trudeau's fiscal Titanic, they're loading up on the deck chairs. At a time of extraordinary economic peril, Canada finds itself led by profligate government with a weak electoral mandate. The problem is exacerbated by the Prime Minister's fixation on personal and partisan advantage rather than adhering to parliamentary accountability. To top it off, his minority reign may last several more years if he concedes to opposition demands for yet more spending. We do not have the details yet, but it is more than obvious that extravagant spending will be the hallmark of the forthcoming federal budget, rather than a focus on growth that just a modicum of restraint. The very low interest rates currently cushioning the debt service costs seem to have blinded the Liberals to the risk of massive debts. But low rates do not preclude credit downgrades, a compromised ability to access capital, or an eventual market-wide rise in rates. This creates a big long-term problem. According to the Fraser Institute, because of population aging and continuing high spending, the federal government will not balance its budgets anytime over the next 3 decades. That's 30 years. A prime minister who, when the subject is climate, worries constantly about our children and their children is evidently indifferent to the impacts of these coming generations of the massive debts his government is piling up. I scroll down a bit. Fourth place election finisher NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has said he may support the Liberals for the remaining 3 years of their mandate, provided certain of his ideas are adopted, including paid sick leave and an extension of the curb for furloughed workers. The Liberals have devoted to their own survival are eager to comply. What could possibly go wrong? Well, the U.S. rating agency has the answer to that. Last Friday, Fitch Ratings launched its third warning volley at the Liberals' Titanic as it sails headlong toward its rendezvous with the fiscal iceberg. I scroll down a bit. There's more of a Titanic comparison here. And it's a long-standing joke. I mark Titanic as favorite, and whenever I can't find something to watch, I jokingly just turn it on. Jokingly. Fitch, which had earlier downgraded Canada bonds from AAA, warned that promises in the throne speech will raise the deficit and debt beyond its June estimates, and that the debt to GDP ratio is already significantly higher than median of its AA-rated peers. Moreover, failure to set clear post-pandemic fiscal anchors and reduce the federal deficit to sustainable levels after the public health crisis could renew negative ratings pressure. Okay, so the debt to GDP ratio is what Morneau used to anchor the Canadian economy, to say we're okay to spend this much because the debt to GDP ratio isn't above 35% and 29% is our target and blah 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 blah. And people could see that argument. There were other people in the financial world who could say, yeah, that's an okay way to do things because other countries are doing it this way. Now that's become thrown out the window. Morneau isn't part of the play anymore, and fiscal anchors are one of those financial terms that people in the finance world would probably know, but Chrystia Freeland is just getting up to speed on, right? The finance minister whisperer just behind the curtain over there is saying, yes, fiscal anchors are good, right? We need those. What's that, Paul Martin? So you have to have those kind of things, and they're thoroughly not around. So the ratings agencies are taking notice of this, and well, that's a problem, right? And failure to set clear post-pandemic fiscal anchors and reduce the federal deficit to sustainable levels, and after the public health crisis could renew negative ratings pressure. That's, in other words, says the article, as a debt downgrade. The latest addition to spending and debt are the extension of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, CEWS, through summer 2021, increases to small business emergency financing, long-term childcare support, a national pharmacare program, and public investment to create green jobs and infrastructure. All of which is just a terrible, terrible, awful idea. And it's the federal government getting involved in things they shouldn't get involved in. It's the province's job to deliver service. It's not the federal government's job to deliver service. They're tramping all over traditional everything. Fitch estimates the federal deficit will reach $380 billion, 17% of GDP, up from the government's estimate of $343 billion. It's a sign of the times that a whopping increase of $37 billion receives virtually no media attention. Yet these deficits are unprecedented by post-war standards. Consolidated gross general government debt will be 20% greater than the economy. That's 20% greater than the economy. Okay, that's a lot. It's significant. And I don't think that's good. Okay, large structural deficits are exceptionally difficult to deal with politically, especially when new programs are partnered with provincial governments, such as childcare or pharmacare. Fitch remarks dryly that there was no mention of offsetting revenue increases, though taxing wealthy Canadians and large digital service companies were noted as possibilities. That could mean a wealth tax, an NDP favorite, an increase in the capital gains inclusion rate or succession duties. Hikes may not be confined to the mega wealthy, but could extend to the upper middle class and beyond in the form of income bracket increases, GST, or carbon tax hikes, and on and on. We may have to endure the ultimate fiscal nightmare for years, a spend-thrift minority liberal government depending on an NDP that wants to tax and spend even more. There's no way that could end well. Where are the patriots planning to counter this? Because these guys have got this sewn up. They've got this sewn up. Anybody who disagrees is racist. They've got the school boards. They've got the municipalities. They've got the province. They've got Doug Ford and Jason Kenney. They've got this sewn up. Where are the patriots? Because we need a response. And the response can't be, maybe we should join those guys. Oh, goodness. Okay. Richard DeCries says, since his administration, his admiration for dictatorship of China, Trudeau planned to use, and is using, military to monitor tweets of critical of COVID-19 pandemic response. Yeah, so that's interesting. That's a Rebel News report. I came across it. I haven't watched the whole thing. I couldn't imagine that the military is watching my show, but maybe. I think that would be funny. I think that would be like, I'm sure I'm on a list or two. I'm sure Justin Trudeau doesn't like my show. But I think that it's not appropriate to be using Canadian military to, unless you're gonna try and actually do what the public says. But it looks like they're just gonna try and shut the public up. Like, this guy's a ne'er-do-well, kill his channel or Twitter, or make it difficult for him to earn money or whatever, right? Like no monetization, whatever. All sorts of, my views are messed with. All sorts of that kind of stuff happens. Twitter during the campaign, since the campaign, I haven't been, my Twitter account hasn't been locked once. Notable, right? Twitter doesn't care about me now, right? So isn't that interesting? So it's not unbelievable, but it is disappointing and not what you would expect in a free country like ours, right? There's monitoring for any dissent. How dare you? How dare you disagree? Here it is. COVID-19, we're going to get into COVID-19. COVID-19 tests that give results in minutes to be rolled out across the world. Global initiative will supply 120 million rapid antigen tests to low and middle income countries. Canada doesn't get any. Cough, cough, cough. Michelle Rempel asked about this in the House of Commons, and she's blocked me, so I'm not going to give her any. I'm not going to highlight her, but she asked about this, and apparently we don't have any access to this. Ontario Hospital Association calls for return of stage 2 restrictions as province reports a record of 700 new cases. Now, a couple of things are going into this. Case backlogs are getting cleared. So like if Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they were doing 40,000 tests, but they could only clear 30,000 of those tests, and then they cleared the backlog of those 3 days, like 30,000 tests on the Monday, right? So there's all the backlog of those tests. So that's a couple of days of backlog plus the tests that they did today. Also, the number of tests that they're doing is a lot more than the number of tests they were doing in April and May. And So the percentage of positive tests is going down. It's actually declining, which is wild, right? Like the percentage of positive tests is much lower. So if you have 700 positive out of tests of 5,000, that's a lot. If you have a test 700 positive in a test of 40,000, that's not as much, right? Percentage wise, right? And I haven't done the math. I'm not going to. Sorry. Brian Lilly says, Ontario Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca says it's time for Ford Nation to put Ottawa and the GTA back into phase 2 and have opposition MPPs on the COVID committee. I don't trust Doug Ford at all. It looks like he's been totally compromised by whatever group has usurped all the rest of the leaders, the globalists or whatever. But I like the Liberals even less. Sorry, new Kathleen Wynne. Be quiet. You weren't elected. No, I have no interest in what Liberal MPs have to say. Thanks. There is no gender impact. It's garbage. It's ridiculous. And I'm sick and tired. What you should do as Liberals is focus on speaking to your base. And if you don't resonate, you won't get more seats. Be quiet. We want in on the committee. Get real. Earn it, morons. But he's also advocating for a return to phase 2, right? Along with the Ontario doctors. Apparently, and I'll tell you in just a second, Ontario is not going to phase 2, or Toronto is not moving to phase 2. But I don't know about Doug Ford, right? I don't know about him. He's making all the noise. Looks like he's setting up for a phase 2 shutdown, and the numbers do not back it up as far as I have seen. I'll show you what I see and what I'm looking at, but having a shutdown over this, no way, not borne out by the data at all. Quebec is doing it. Quebec tightens COVID-19 restrictions as 3 regions are put on red alert. That's what they call their, I guess phase 2 is red alert. Somebody was telling me, I'm not going to read through this, but I'm just showing you this is happening. They were setting up for this. I don't know if Doug Ford will be able to hold out before Thanksgiving, but some form of lockdown, I think, is probably being pressured on Doug Ford. And I would say that I think it's probably on the way. I've heard rumors of before Thanksgiving. If we get through Thanksgiving weekend with no further lockdown, then I will owe Doug Ford an apology and I will say it on air. But at this point, I think that there's all the signals, including Quebec going to lockdown, that show that Doug Ford may be thinking in the same direction. And I don't think that we should be going in that direction. That would be absolutely a death blow to a lot of businesses. Because I mean, right now to Christmas is like where you make a lot of money, right? There's staff parties, there's work parties, there's get-togethers, there's students, there's lots of money to be made at this point, right? If you've missed up to this point in the year, man, this is the time that you can make some money back. And if you're just locked down, well, sorry, what's the point? If you don't have people bringing in revenue to your business, you have bills. You don't have a business. And if you have bills, why? Like, okay, 680 News. Toronto Public Health said the social bubble is no longer effective as cases surge in the city. What about masks? The whole reason they said masks worked was because in regions that mandated masks, case numbers dropped by all these. It was 2%, and that increased over time. Bullshit. And what's with all the kids on the street? Like, what is with put them? There is no way that's more safe than a classroom. There's no way that is more safe than a classroom at all. You idiots. Get off the road. Get off the road. Am I the only person who sees this? Okay. Ellen de Villa also said Toronto is not moving back to stage 2 just yet and will recommend to council for bars and restaurants. And we'll table recommendations, for council for bars and restaurants. The recommendations, I think, in New York were 25% of capacity. It's not appropriate. Here's a doctor. Here's the Florida doctor on. And Florida has a comparable population to Ontario. I think they have 21 million. I think this is off the top of my head, so if I'm wrong, I apologize. But I think they have 21 million. Ontario has roughly 17 million, 15 to 17 million. And so, and their case counts and stuff are roughly the same, but they're opening up and we're not because they're doing hospitalizations and ICU numbers. We're getting to it. Sorry, I'm a little long today.
It seems to me that if you're test positive with no symptoms with a very sensitive PCR test, and they can't even tell you if you're infectious, we're quarantining across the country probably hundreds of thousands or millions of people who aren't even contagious. And I think that obviously has a huge cost to society. Doesn't seem to be getting a lot of discussion, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very important point. And actually, Dr. Levitt's a biologist. He can tell us all about the PCR technology. But the key thing about the PCR technology that I think is important for this discussion is that essentially you were doubling the genetic material if it's present, of the virus if it's present, right? If you have a very tiny amount of the virus, or if it's a viral fragment that's not actually that your body has successfully attacked, your immune system is successfully attacked, then what you're amplifying is something that's not going to pose any risk either to you or to others. So you're asymptomatic. The PCR, you're positive with the PCR. It's not a false positive in a technical sense, but in a functional sense, it's a false positive. Epidemiologically, it's a false positive, right? I'm not going to infect you, even though I have this even though I'm PCR positive, because it took so many doublings to reach the point that we can infer that there really wasn't very much genetic material for the virus present to begin with. I think that you're absolutely right to point out the cost of that when you attach it to a policy of contact tracing and isolation and quarantine.
Okay, so he's talking about how you take a little bit of something inside you and you amplify it up, and they're amplifying it up so much to be meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. There's no you're asymptomatic, and there's no virus there. They're just they're finding fragments of something. You can link is in the description. You can watch the whole interview. It's an interesting interview. Here's some numbers. First, I guess we'll look at the COVID numbers because this is what we're talking about here. Out of Ontario, there were 50,000 cases, 43,000 resolved, 2,840 deaths in Ontario, and hospitalized 128, 29 in ICU, 17 on a ventilator, and these numbers are small in the grand scheme of deaths from other, like how people die generally, right? This is from 2006 to 2018, this chart. And the number one cause of death is cancer. And cancer in 2006 was taking 67,000 people every year. And in 2018, it was taking 79,000 people roughly. The second leading cause of death is heart disease. And in 2006, it was taking 49,000, and now it's taking 53,000, and it remains the second cause of death. Number 3 is cerebrovascular diseases. Number 8 through 6, depending on the year. In 2006, it was number 8, and 2018, it was number 6. Influenza and pneumonia, and in 2006, it took 5,000 people. In 2018, it took 8,000 people. And I'll say again, the deaths in Ontario are, I think, in line with that. I think they're in line with that. Why are we shutting down the whole province? Why is that even on the table? I don't understand. When you look at these numbers, and again, I did a sheet on this the other day about how these were measured, and it's statistics, and they take total deaths, and they're going to have heart disease and things like that listed, but influenza and pneumonia are kind of like the leftover deaths, right? Like accidents are broken out into here, but accidents are killing a lot more people than influenza and pneumonia, and like a lot more people than even COVID-19. So again, I can't fathom a government looking at this and looking at how failed the models were and saying, you know what we've got to do? Shut things down. Got to shut it down ASAP. Okay, we're almost done, and I'm a little long, so I apologize for that. But here's the Ottawa Citizen: demonizing students' dorm parties amid COVID-19 could lead to about 100 Western University students facing sanctions. No, they didn't get the virus. They went and had a party when they could get a virus. Don't you know it's all about your safety? It's for you that we're doing this, you students. How many people in Ontario under 19 have died? Not too many? Okay. How many in the hospital? Not too many, right? So what's going on? Ontario says it won't cap testing despite memo ordering test reductions. So yesterday, I reported that they'd reduced testing, and apparently they haven't. Apparently that's been walked back. Here's a news reporter. If the memo was never approved or reviewed by the minister, I don't understand why that wasn't said when we went for comment in the morning. It's not like this was dropped on them at 5 p.m. They had all day, and we didn't keep it a secret as we went to multiple different bodies. So they were looking for clarification on the reduction of tests. And I was telling you about the backlog in tests. The reason they were reducing tests is to make sure that the tests they get there could be finished and reported on in reasonable time. That's the excuse, right? But then they walked that back. So it's all so strange. It's all very strange. I've been talking about having compliance officers, new labor inspecting officers. We lost 95 nurses in Newmarket, but we got 98 labor inspectors. Here's Soho, strange sight. City inspectors working through Soho looking for illegal speakeasies open after the 10 p.m. cutoff. What is the difference? Does the virus know it's 10 p.m.? It's 10:02. let's go, boys, right? It's time to get those people drinking in the bars because they haven't gone home, right? They were allowed to drink in bars at 9:30, but at 10:02, that virus is super, super infectious, right? It's going to get you. It knows. And you know what else it knows? If you're walking the wrong way down a grocery store aisle, right? Like if you're walking the right way and you pass somebody, the virus knows. It's not going to do anything, right? But if you are walking the wrong way, the virus knows you're walking the wrong way and it will get that person. It will get them. It doesn't matter if neither of you have the virus. Clearly. You'll get the eyes from people, right? Because that's all you can see. It's super fun. I don't like being the only one unmasked, and I'm seeing more people around. But there's one guy at Walmart, and he works there, and he gets very angry at me, and like I can see he like tries to stare me down, and I just kind of smile at him. I'm like, "Hi, it's okay. I'm not sick, and even if I was sick, it's probably not COVID-19. And even if it was COVID-19, I'm not getting the brain probing thing in my face. It's not happening. So this probably hurt more than that, but I'm not getting it. Sorry, not happening. What are you going to do for me if I test positive? Go drink some water. It's a virus." Morons. I'm very frustrated. And getting more frustrated because our leadership seems to be more and more silly, more and more influenced by people like the Ontario Hospital Association. And for whatever reason, the Liberal leader whose claim to fame was making a cake after Doug Ford made a cheesecake. Like, come on, man. Like, that's the biggest thing you've done? Maybe speak to your base. Anyway, regardless. Who isn't me? I'm looking for someone sane to run the province, right? Not somebody who thinks that they should be included on the COVID committee just because, right? Not somebody who thinks that getting more city inspectors is a good idea, right? So, yeah. Very, very interesting. Thanks for watching, everybody. Sorry for the rantiness of today. I apologize. I'll try and be more even keel tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Some people were asking about Speaking Moistly. I'm scheduled to talk with Greg in a few hours, 2 o'clock today, so I'll hopefully have that up shortly. And, well, have a wonderful, wonderful day.